welcome to Manx Radio's Rewind, which, as the name suggests, gives you a chance to listen back to a few little gems from Manx Radio's output over the last week or two, which you might have missed. Think Pick of the Week, only Manxer, and you've got it. It's also a great reminder of the splendid breadth and scope of Manx Radio's programming, and perhaps a chance for you to think about checking out some programmes which you might never have listened to before, or, let's be honest, didn't even know existed. We all listen to the news and the weather pretty much, even I do. Manx Radio Breakfast is how thousands of you start each day during the week, and the Man in Line remains as controversially popular as ever it was. But there's so much more, from the wonderful Island Life programmes, both regular series like Countryside or The Vault, or one-off specials, an example of which we'll be hearing shortly. And of course, even if you can't listen live, there's always catch-up and a huge array of Manx Radio programmes as podcasts, so now you can listen where and when you want. And there's also even more programming which exists purely as podcast only. You can check out that at your leisure, including, of course, the almost award-winning several times IM1. The world of Manx Radio's output is indeed your oyster. Or should that be Queenie? Just go to the Manx Radio website and click on podcasts if you want to find out more. I mentioned Island Life specials, one-off programmes made by both Manx Radio presenters, new staff and freelancers. And there was a cracker recently which saw Manx Radio's MD, Chris Pearson, out and about with the men and women who, in their spare time, put their lives at risk in order to save others. I'm talking about members of the Coast Guard and RNLI, of course. And Chris was invited to take his mic along and join them in an exercise, which I'll allow him to explain.
Though the island's Royal National Lifeboat Institute teams get the opportunity to train with the Coast Guard, it's been a number of years since they got the opportunity to undertake helicopter winching operations with the Royal Air Force. In mid-December, the Port St Mary RNLI team got that opportunity, and I joined them on the boat for the exercise. So we're just on the back deck of the RNLI vessel now, watching the helicopter, which is at an angle of about 80 degrees to us. It's nose pointed directly south. We're steaming along in an easterly direction, and the helicopter is coming in closer and closer. I can see the crew working out their plan of action and moving closer, probably about 30-40 metres away from us now. It's got a bit of a swell on it, but it's not too bad at all. Chatting to the helicopter crew later on at Ronaldsway Airport, I spoke with the crew member sitting in the right-hand seat today, closest to the lifeboat.
Mark Scott, I'm a full-time reserve service Lieutenant Commander in the Royal Navy, working on 202 RAF Squadron at RAF Valley.
And you were right seat today, weren't you?
Today, the aircraft commander was John Owen, Flight Lieutenant John Owen. He took the left-hand seat and I stole the right-hand seat so that I could fly with the boat. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So the exercise itself today involved coming over. Tell us a bit about the aircraft you come over with, and tell us a bit about, from your perspective, what you were hoping to achieve.
So part of our flying training is to remain current in the roles that we teach. One of the roles that we operate on is called boat transfers. Now, we normally train with the Smith Don, which is our contract boat that comes out of Holyhead. And we know that boat like the back of our hand, and so it's really good for us to be able to expand the envelope and work with other boats. An opportunity has recently arisen to work with the RNLI. And it started off earlier in the year where we worked with real RNLI, and we've been around Holyhead now, and we've operated with Malfra, Beaumaris, also Porthincline, Abersoch and Pwllheli, and we've yet to work with Holyhead, and we've also ticked off Triada Bay. The aircraft that we fly is an EC-145, affectionately called the Jupiter. It's a really good aircraft from the perspective of working together as a crew. It's a great aircraft trainer for the pilots. The crewmen in the back have to work slightly harder because it's a more confined area, but that means that they have to be a lot more efficient with the space that they've got to work. So when they move on to their frontline aircraft, they're best versed in the way that they conduct their drills. The EC-145, the Jupiter, twin engine, gas turbine helicopter, it can be flown single pilot. We choose to do it with twin pilot today, so maximum training benefit.
Once the helicopter crew are happy, the lifeboat sets a heading and speed and the exercise moves on. So the helicopter is now probably 30 metres astern of the RNLI boat. The Isle of Man behind it in a grey but not too cold day. The sea's got a bit of a swell on it, but it's not too bad. The helicopter is now making its final approach towards us, ready to winch. Like most of the crew, RNLI volunteer Laura Cordner fits her saving lives at sea role around a busy day job.
I work for a bank, a high street bank, so I do high value business banking for my clients.
So this is a real change then?
Very much so, very much so.
What is it you enjoy about it?
I've always liked the sea, and just, having these people here, we all support each other, they support me, and it's just such a good cause to come and volunteer. It's really good.
How long have you been doing it now?
This is my 6th year. It was my anniversary in October. So, yeah.
And to get alongside the helicopter today, is that the first time you've worked with air activity or?
First with RAF, usually we work with the Coast Guard in their helicopter, so it's a bit of a different one this time.
And how did you find it?
I love it, just the opportunities to get to do these things and to really play a big part in it is just unbelievable every day.
Great stuff, and really atmospheric, and I always find it amazing to think as I'm messing around in the garden or on stage or singing sea shanties in my spare time, there are men and women who are doing exercises like that on cliffs or out at sea or around the coast in order to be able to save the lives of others, often at risk to their own. We should never take that for granted and be forever grateful, I believe. You can hear Chris's programme in its entirety if you go to the Manx Radio podcast page on the website and look for Manx Radio Island Life Series Specials. There's some great stuff there. Now, you probably don't need me to tell you it is Guild Week, the 133rd Guild Week to be exact. The Manx Music, Speech and Dance Festival, an island institution and part of the cultural fabric of the Isle of Man. As ever, or at least that's how it feels, Judith Lay was there, and will be there all the coming week, of course. I have no idea when she goes to bed, or indeed if she does go to bed at all. She's there with her microphones, her trusty audio whiz Tim, videographer Chris Quirk, and 100 weight of bananas, usually her sole sustenance for 7 days, to bring you all the best from the festival. And on Sunday evening last, just after 9 p.m, she introduced the first of her programmes for Guild Week 2025.
Well, Foster Mai, good evening and welcome to Sundown Goes to the Guild, or The Lounge brings you the latest news from the Manx Music Festival. Whichever way you look at it, you are very welcome. I'm Judith, and for the next couple of hours, as we're in the lounge together, we will be looking over the first 2 days of the 133rd Manx Music Festival. Isn't that an incredible achievement? Still going strong, and just lovely this weekend to see, for the first 2 days of competition, the Royal Hall and the Promenade Suite absolutely packed with people, packed with a mixture of performers and audience members enjoying some fantastic entertainment. And add to the mix today in the beautiful setting of St Thomas's Church, where they had the most amazing cakes when we had a tea break partway through the competitions today. St Thomas's came in as a venue today, and there were a day and an evening's competitions in St Thomas's, and we'll be returning there later in the week for some more competition. So what have I got for you tonight? Well, we still haven't found. So lots for us to talk about, lots to listen to. Let's get started. Right, let's just quite simply say Manx Concert Brass, and this was a winning ensemble performance. Enjoy. That was the brass ensemble class, of which Manx Concert Brass were the winners. And it's an own choice class. You can pick any piece that you wish. And I'm sure you recognised the Manx Concert Brass choice there being George Gershwin's Summertime. Their musical director is, as always, Ian Clegg. And the only rule set apart from the time limit of 8 minutes is that it must be a minimum of 5 players and a maximum of 15. Now, just a little reminder that in line with all other music festivals now, no marks are given out. Marks are given, but they're just put on the adjudication sheet and given to the individual competitors. And it's up to them. It's really, as I was saying, it's more about the adjudication, the comments, the helpful suggestions and observations that the adjudicator makes that is entirely between the performers and their teacher if they wish, or just for the performer's own use. But no marks are given out.
Judith's programmes are so good, you really should try to listen if you can't get down to the Guild in person, or even if you can for that matter. I can't help but smile at her last comments there regarding the fact that marks are no longer broadcast or given out in the Guild, or indeed in other music festivals around the country. It's not unique to the Guild, that. The marks are accessible, of course, by the contestant, as Judith says. Now, I can hear some of you silently mouthing the word snowflakes. But I'm sure it's a sign of the times and changing sensibilities. And I smile because when I first started at Manx Radio, Guild coverage consisted pretty much entirely of the Guild correspondent back in the day. I certainly remember the great Peter Fletcher doing this at one stage, reading out the marks given to contestants in each class for the consumption of the populace. And if you've ever looked back at the papers from the earlier part of the 20th century, they used to actually print the comments of the adjudicator, whether good, bad or indifferent, for everyone to enjoy, if that's the right word. You had to be made of stern stuff to compete in the Guild back in the day. You'll find Guild videos and podcasts on the Manx Radio website all week, a report on breakfast every morning sometime after 6 for the early risers, and a roundup of what's gone on each day at 9 p.m, taking the place of the usual specialist music slots, of course. An interesting snippet which caught my attention in the news stream recently, bulletins on the hour throughout the day with breakfast from 6, update at 5 p.m, was about our native sheep, the Lochtan. Whilst aware it was a primitive breed and rare breed, I had rather assumed it was doing quite well in recent years as a breed, with considerable interest these days in all things heritage, provenance of foodstuff and the like off to the fore, and boutique farmers and suppliers providing added value products using artisan meats, if we can call it that. Well, it's not quite as easy or as good as I imagined it seems. As always, the newsroom have ears around not just the Isle of Man, but further afield, if you'll excuse the pun. And on the BBC's Farming Today programme, Chief Executive of the Rare Breed Survival Trust, Christopher Price, was heard explaining how they had recently added Lochtons to its priority watch list due to falling numbers.
The Manx Lochtan is a small, primitive, hardy sheep, which, as the name suggests, originated from and is strongly associated with the Isle of Man. They've got a rather attractive reddish-brown fleece and normally a significant number of horns. There can be up to 6 of them, so they're quite spectacular when you see them.
And why do you think these rare breeds are in trouble?
There will possibly be an element of people just choosing not to register their stock because it is expensive and times are hard. We're also talking about really quite small numbers, so it doesn't take much for a few farmers to change their approach to have a significant effect on percentages. But I think it's as likely or more likely to be a commercial matter. It's harder to find markets for primitive sheep products unless you know what you're doing.
What does primitive mean in this context?
There are a list of breeds which came over from primitive times, by which I mean Vikings, Romans, Celts. They tend to look less like your stereotypical white fluffy sheep. There are some very good farmers, particularly in the Lake District and the West Country, who are making money out of primitive sheep breeds by building a brand based on those primitive qualities and the attractive story they tell.
The group wants the UK government to establish a ministerial-led round-table group to look at ways to strengthen numbers of Lochtons and other rare breeds. Can you imagine the Manx Lochtan dying out as a breed, not being seen in places like Craignish or around the island in farms like Red Mai? Hopefully That would never come to pass, but it seems we can't afford to be complacent and just assume someone will always breed them. We've just marked the 80th anniversary of the island's worst ever air crash. 31 men died when a US military aircraft crashed into North Barule on the 23rd of April 1945. Among those attending a memorial service at the site this year was Donald Madder's great-uncle Andy Peter Jr., who was just 22 when he lost his life in the disaster. Don made the journey over to the Isle of Man with some of his family members from Pennsylvania, which is also where his great-uncle Andy was from. Amy Griffith from Manx Radio Newsroom spoke to Don as he stood at the site of the crash which claimed his relative's life, and he told her that words are not enough to thank the people of the Isle of Man for continuing to remember the accident.
I started researching him back in 2003. He was an only son. He had 5 sisters. So it was a real tragedy for his immediate parents and the rest of his family. And it sort of carried on to generations that followed. We looked up to him as a real hero. And I started researching in 2003, published a book in 2017 after a lot of digging. Not only about Andy, but about the guys that traveled with him and his friends on the ground at Ridgewell Air Base in Essex. And we sort of set a goal of trying to come over and commemorate him in 75, and the coronavirus put a stop to that. And God willing, here we are for the 80th, and we're standing truly on the mountain at 10:35 this morning when the plane came to rest, killing all 31 aboard. So quite humbling and quite emotional.
I was going to say, how are you feeling standing there as you are at the moment?
It truly makes you realize your humanity and how 31 innocent lives they had served for 2 years on the ground on an air base, protecting liberty. And their life came to such a tragic end.
And that's the thing, because the war was coming to an end. They were going on what should have been a lovely few days off and a bit of a thank you for all of the work that you've done. And for it to end in the way it did seems just painfully unfair.
Yeah, it's funny. I brought Andy and his good friend Ernie Bain, who was from his family was from Northern Ireland in Derry. And 4 weeks before this incident, he and Ernie traveled 18 hours one way from the airfield in Essex to Ernie's family in Derry. So he would have traversed the pattern, we think, up through Liverpool and across the sea, probably catching a ferry on the other side to get to Northern Ireland. And 4 weeks later, he crashes in this very spot. When you think of his young life, and the fact that his experience brought us here, we would have never come to the Isle of Man. It's just truly humbling.
So tell me what you know about Andy then, and who he was as a person.
Well, Andy was he was sick as a child. I think he ended up contracting some fever, and his sisters rallied around him, and he grew to be a strong man. He ended up going into the coal mines, working with his father, who was our great-grandparents were Slovak immigrants. He worked in the mine before the call to duty in 1942 in August came true. He went and signed up at a local theater. His father really didn't want him to go, being an only son, and Andy felt obligated.
So in that sense, losing him would have had a massive impact on the family then.
Oh, my goodness. Well, a little of our story, my brother and I, is, we grew up with this painting of Andy on the wall in my grandmother's house. And Andy, through his money that he earned in the service, actually bought the house that we grew up in with his service pay for his parents. So when my parents were married in the early 60s, the 5 sisters agreed to sell the house to them. And my brother and I grew up in Andy's house. And my parents still live there today. So it's truly an 80-year mark across the board.
And it's just proof as well that a life can end, but it doesn't really stop. As long as everyone still remembers them and cherishes their memory in the way that your family clearly has, they're always still here, aren't they?
So true, so true. I really feel spiritually that he's guided me to so many interesting people and interesting places, and he's been gone for such a long time. So I do feel a spiritual connection to him, and certainly so this morning as we look out across to the Irish Sea.
It's amazing to hear how moved Don is by standing at that site after all these years, and you can hear his interview in full and find out more about the North Wirral aircraft disaster via the Manx Radio newscast podcast that Amy did, and you'll find that, of course, on the website. Now, the man in line, or the moan in line, as it's popularly known, is as popular as ever, particularly as its podcast, which is how people around the world access it. And I do mean around the globe. A quick look at the podcast analytics shows that the Man in Line is downloaded by people in Ireland, the UK, the US, Spain, Australia, and even Cambodia, plus the Isle of Man, of course. Presenter Andy Wint prides himself on being up to date with current events and is always well briefed on matters likely to arise in the programme. But one Man in Line regular, or at least relative regular compared to some, had him stumped with this one.
Robert's on now. Hi, Robert.
Hi, a bit of a square wheels connection here, unfortunately. I'm just on a bus, so bear with me a second.
Right,
but
okay.
I was just wondering, is there any Lafay jam that they still do with the parish churches and things like that, given away at the fairs?
What jam is that again?
Well, it's a type of strawberry jam, I believe.
Right.
It comes from the south of the island.
Right.
It's very good at what it does. But I mean, you can buy loads of it. You could buy, £1,028 if you wanted
and
to.
we're wondering who's selling it then.
Well, I imagine you can get it from the stores. They used to sell them at Safeway, didn't they? But they don't do it anymore. So I was just wondering about the jam content.
Okay. And what's the name of the jam again, Robert?
Well, I heard it was Lafay jam.
Lafay. Okay.
Lafay jam.
All right. Well, we'll find out about that. Well, if there's a special jam for the Isle of Man, I'm all for that, Robert.
I love the fact that Robert says the jam is very good at what it does. Being sticky? Spreading on bread? Was it a wind-up? Was the clue in the name? Or are you a connoisseur of Lafay jam on your scones with several pots stored away safely in the larder? Do let me know. Howard Kane with an E at manxradio.com, and we'll tell the world. That's about it for this edition of Rewind, or Remind, as Alex Brindley called it in an internal memo. Both names work as it happens. I'll leave you with a toot or two from the Tutors, if only to say that sentence. The Douglas Band Tutors took second place in the ensemble class for up to age 15 at the Guild, with their rendition of Stargazer by Alan Fernie. And the Guild being what it is, some of these young musicians honing their skills here under the watchful eye of Ken Mitchell will probably come to watch their children perform in the Guild in 30 years' time or so. Who knows? Cheerio.